Hello, Simone. Today we are going to be talking about an interesting phenomenon that I was aware was happening, but I was not aware how severe it was. And it is chilling when you go to the stats. And here we are talking about the mass and very recent mass exodus of families and children from major American cities. They are just disappearing. For this, I will be looking at an article in The Atlantic called "The Urban Family Exodus is a Warning for Progressives." So, of course, the piece starts with the writer bemoaning J.D. Vance as the worst human being in the world, and Trumpists is all monsters because they must, in their performative schlicking. I love this as always whenever they're the pronatalist piece. They must start by saying how horrible we all are, and then they go to, but they may have a point. But at the risk of giving Vance any credit here, I must admit that progressives do have a family problem. The problem doesn't exist at the level of individual choice, where conservative scolds tend to fixate. Rather, it exists at the level of urban family policy. American families with young children are leaving big urban counties in droves. And that says something interesting about the state of mobility and damning about the state of American cities and the progressives who govern them. First, the facts. In large urban metros, the number of children under 5 years old is in free fall, according to a new analysis of census data by Conan O'Brien, a policy and oh no, sorry, Connor O'Brien, a
I was
policy
like,
analyst
he's
at
a
the think
policy
tank
analyst now?
new guy at the think tank Economic Innovation Group from 2020 to 2023. So in 3 years, the number of these kids declined by nearly 20% in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. They also fell by double-digit percentage points in counties making up most or all of Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, and St. Louis. If you do not understand how huge that is, imagine if some other population declined by 20% in Manhattan over the course of 3 years. Imagine if, like, the number of black people in Manhattan declined by 20% over 3 years. Would progressives be a brick? Would they be running around like the sky was on fire?
Well, and we also have to think about the industry impacts of this. If there are not enough children to justify good schools, good daycares, good services, it's
We're
going to be
gonna
really
get to
hard to
all of
get them.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is terrifying.
This exodus is not merely the result of past COVID waves. Yes, the pace of the urban exodus was fastest during the high pandemic years of 2020 and 2021. But even at the slower rate of outmigration since then, several counties, including those encompassing Manhattan, Brooklyn, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, are on pace to lose 50% of their under 5 population in 20 years. 50% in the next 20 years. To be clear, demographics have complex feedback loops and counter feedback loops. The toddler population of these places won't necessarily have by the 2040s, but we all know it will, so let's be honest here. Nor is this exodus merely the result of declining nationwide birth rates. Yes, women across the country are having fewer children than they used to. The share of women under 40 who have never given birth doubled from the early 1980s to the 2020s. But the under 5 population is still declining twice as fast in large urban counties as it is elsewhere, according to O'Brien's sensor analysis. So, what's the matter with Manhattan, LA, and Chicago? After the Great Recession, during a period of low urban crime, young college educated people flocked to downtown areas to advance their career. Retail upscaled and housing costs increased. Soon families started to leave. In 2019, the economist Jed Colocco showed that in cities including San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., young high-income college-educated whites were moving in and multiracial families with children were moving out. The coronavirus pandemic, which resulted in school closures and loosened the tether between home and office, pushed even more families to flee. Now, I want to note that they are playing a little shell game here because I will put these statistics on the screen right here. Multiracial people as an ethnic group have the lowest fertility rate of any ethnic group in the US, well below whites.
Wait, really?
Yeah, remember when we were going over that piece yesterday?
Oh.
But yeah, He's just playing games here, playing
Mhm.
games here. And also, as I mentioned in that episode, of all ethnic groups in the US other than inter-ethnic groups, Blacks have the second lowest fertility rate. If you are only looking at Blacks not in the bottom 30% of income. If you're looking at Blacks in the bottom 30% of income, it brings the Black, fertility rate in line with other fertility rates, but
Mhm.
Blacks actually have a devastatingly low fertility when they're not in just objective poverty,
Wow.
in the United States at least, which goes against progressive narratives. So here they're saying, quote, "I am deeply worried about the family exodus doom loop," end quote, O'Brien told me. Quote, "When the population of young kids in a city falls to 10 or 20% in just a few years, that's a potential political earthquake almost overnight. There are fewer parents around to fight for better schools, local playgrounds, or all the other mundane amenities families care about," end quote. Behavior is contagious. As Yale sociologist Nicholas Chitinsky has shown, if you have a friend who smokes or exercises, it significantly increases the odds that you will do the same. The same principle might hold for having or not having kids. Actually, studies have shown I don't know how he's not familiar with these studies, but okay, whatever. As young children become scarce in big cities, people in their 20s and 30s who are thinking about having children will have fewer opportunities to see firsthand how fulfilling parenthood can be. What they're left with instead are media representations, which tend to be inflected by the negativity bias of news. At a glance, these trends might not seem like they have anything to do with contemporary progressivism, but they do. America's richest cities are profoundly left leaning, and many of them, including New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, are themselves ensconced in left leaning states. The places ought to be advertisements for what modern progressive movement can achieve without the meddlesome conservatism getting in the way. At the local or state level, if progressives want to sell their cause to the masses, they should be able to say, elect us and we'll make America more like Oakland or Brooklyn or suburban Detroit. If they can't make that argument, that's a problem. Right now, it's hard to make that argument because urban progressivism is afflicted by an inability to build. Cities in red states are building much more housing than blue states, blah, blah, blah. And they're going NIMBY here. But the point being is, and just, it is Democrats that are keeping this building stuff from going up. It's due to the way the corrupt unions influence Democratic politicians to ensure that building costs in the US are much more expensive in cities than they are even in the EU. Again,
Mhm.
visual politic video on this. I'll put the picture on screen so you can search it. The picture says the $2 million toilet, but I think the actual title is something like infrastructure costs in the US are skyrocketing. In visual politic, I would always recommend their channel.
Oh, they're
When a lot of
great. Yeah.
ask, like, how I know so much about the world in terms of, like, contemporary international politics. Visuopolitik is probably the best educational research for contemporary political events that exists in the world today by a significant margin. After them, Peter Zeihan is the next best resource.
Some people dismiss him as a CIA asset, quote unquote, and I would really push back on this notion. That's not to say that he isn't obviously tied very closely to the American military industrial complex, and he doesn't have a very strong motivations to promote their interests, but he is the first geopolitical analyst that any of the mainstream listen to that recognize the huge potential impact of fertility collapse. And he has made a number of very, very correct calls over the ages. And he's generally been right about most of the calls that he's made. So when an individual comes to me and they're like, oh, don't trust this guy because he has these preset interests, I'm like, well, that may be true, but he's sort of batting 100 right now. So when somebody with no geopolitical contacts and who has made no accurate predictions about future geopolitical events comes to me and says, don't trust this guy who has tons of geopolitical contacts because he has tons of geopolitical contacts and who has made tons of accurate predictions about the geopolitical scene and how it's going to play out. I don't know. I'm just a little incredulous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Also, I just love how wholesome Peter Zeihan is, just, like, doing his podcasts while on hikes, a little bit winded, so he's really
not just
trying to
that,
exert
he's a good
himself.
guy. When we were publishing our
Yeah.
book, we asked him for advice and he actually got back to us.
Yeah.
And I always, I have sort of this internal reference for him. Everyone more famous than us who did us a solid before we were as famous as them. And
Yeah.
they're sort of in my never
Or who
ever
just took
betray.
to take time to respond to us as nobodies. It means a lot.
Yeah. And this was back before we had received much news coverage and stuff like that. But also, even now, like that we're well known, I'm like, for example, just Pearly Sings platformed us. She had us on her show. She was friendly with us, and she's at a much higher level than we are, right? So huge for me, infinite. Like, I'm always in her camp. Same with
Mhm.
Chris Williamson. Same with Stuttering Craig, who runs Side Scrollers. These are people who, Ruby Art, who runs What If All His, Ayla. These are all people who helped us before we became big deals. And there's many other famous people who've helped us before we become big deals, but don't want to be officially associated with us. So I'm not going to name their names, but they're still in my I will do and always stand them bucket.
The one downside of this, of course, being that individuals might be able to triangulate who our friends are from the individuals who we always stand no matter what, even when it may not make perfect sense why we're standing them.
But yeah, those are good sources. But anyway, so they basically show in that particular video how progressive politics in the United States has made it impossible to build in the major cities. However, I think if you're saying, oh, the problem is we're not building enough housing in major cities and that's why people aren't having kids, I think you're missing the forest for the trees.
As an example of this, a lot of people, when they complain about, oh, low fertility rates are totally a factor of small living spaces or cost of housing, I would point out that in Israel over the past decade, home prices have increased by 345% and are unusually high on a global scale. And this has actually been driven primarily by government policy, specifically regulations and inefficient land use. And yet, Israel has sky high fertility rates.
I do think he makes a point that if progressives can't go to conservatives and be like, in the areas where we dominate, we have fixed the problems that you don't have, because it's clear, I think, to anyone who has lived in a progressive and a conservative district, as we have now, life is like objectively better in conservative districts. Like, there's more stores, it's cheaper, the police are better, the fire people are better, the infrastructure is better. It's kind
It's
of shocking.
humbling. It's humbling just to also even just to see the experience that our son is getting in kindergarten because we're letting him go to public schools kindergarten because he asked. We don't consider it his education. It's a supplement to homeschooling that he like, we consider like soccer. But man, the resources he gets, the treatment he gets, it's incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
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 it
this was not the case. So my brother and his wife, made an exodus from LA,
mhm.
where they were based, and they've just been like, "Oh my god, like, it is so much better out here in rural Pennsylvania than it was in LA in
Yeah.
every respect." And I think this is something where you really didn't wanna move to a rural area when I first suggested it to you, and you were treating it as a massive concession. I remember when we were first talking about this, you're like, "Yeah, but there's so many things to do in the city, and there's so many, like,
And I
what
can
are we
walk
gonna."
everywhere, blah, blah, blah. I
Yeah,
know. I know.
walk everywhere, like, we can walk to the grocery store, and then what ends up happening, right, is you realize. I remember, like, when you realize you're like, "Wait, we were walking to a grocery store 30 minutes and carrying our bags back home, and we are driving 2.5 minutes to a grocery store here, filling our trunk and driving it back home, that it is infinitely more convenient." Or it's like, "Yeah, but you won't have as much to do." I'm sorry, I get to take my kids to the myriad of festivals which are happening constantly around us. I get to take them to pick pumpkins. I get to take them to pick wildflowers at the wildflower picking areas. I get to take them to pet bunny rabbits. I get to take them to, like, it is so much to do that is so much, like, nicer and more wholesome than the things I was doing in the city before.
You know?
And what do I want from city with a kid? Like, what are they offering kids? Nothing. And then it's like, "Oh, but they have a few nice museums." And it's like, "Yeah, maybe, but they're not harder to get to from exurban areas than they are from the cities." So, for example, we went to Philadelphia this weekend to go to the Franklin Institute, and it was a 30-minute drive. If I had gone from the city, what would it have been? A 20-minute drive? Like, this is the thing with cities, especially the major cities like San Francisco that people miss, is you're not actually that much closer to other stuff in cities because the infrastructure of cities is so poorly designed.
And when we also thought that living in a city or sorry, living in the suburbs would isolate us from friends, when it turns out that we actually socialize more and more efficiently as people who live outside the city. And that's not because people come to us because no one's here. No one's even really in Philadelphia. We go out to New York, we go out to DC. But what we do, and we're just about to do this, is we will host happy hours or cocktail parties 2 nights in a row while staying at a nice place and just invite everyone we know in that city to come out. And a decent number of people show up.
Well, it's
That
because we're a limited commodity.
Yeah, and, like, if you're in town, everyone's like, "Well, maybe I'll just see you later. You're here. I'm here. We'll see each other eventually." And it never happens. And we socialized very, very little when we lived in cities. Now that we're outside, we're very systematic about it. We don't waste our time. And when we do it really well. It's nice. So, yeah, it's not what you would expect, I guess. I was very surprised by our move to the suburbs. They're much more pronatal, for sure. Well, and people like More Births on Twitter constantly make this argument that I mean, he likes to argue, I think, that there's just not enough physical space in apartments and cities that people
But
are
hold on, I'll,
too.
I'll argue more than this. I don't just think it's living in a rural area. So that was
Yeah.
one thing that changed. But you have lived in more conservative and less conservative cities. So you've lived in San Francisco and Dallas. What is the
Yeah.
quality of life like between those two cities?
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in Dallas. My family's in local politics in Dallas. So my opinion of Dallas doesn't count. What is your perspective as somebody who visited? I remember the first time you visited and you're like, where are the homeless people?
Yeah. It's too hot for them. Although now there are homeless people in Dallas, but before, yeah,
Not that
there
many.
were.
I mean, you say it's too hot for them, but it's not that. It's that they don't offer services for them
Yeah. There's
to
just not
cause them
that
to
much of an
congregate in the
incentive.
center. San Francisco recently had a policy to convert luxury high rises to homeless apartments that are given to them for free. New York has a policy where they rent out rooms in a hotel room, sometimes luxury hotel rooms, for homeless people rather than letting them sleep on the streets.
Yeah.
You
Not
think
ideal.
Dallas has shit like that?
Not ideal.
That's why they're not in Dallas because they're not putting them up in luxury hotels. And Dallas has Democratic politicians running it. They're just not wackadoos like the ultra progressives of the East Coast.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say. It is very different. Yeah, and even the social scene I thought would be worse in Dallas, and it wasn't. And it
It
wasn't
was
even
much
we
better
couldn't
than San
find
Francisco.
progressive people. In fact, the progressive people that we met in Dallas, because you'd think, "Oh, there are only conservatives in Dallas," and that certainly was the impression of people I knew in the Bay Area when I left. They always said, "Well, couldn't you at least just go to Austin? No, Dallas." But there were many conservative and many progressive young people in Dallas, and they were honestly more interesting because they were progressive, not because it was normative, but because they were genuinely progressive people. And I think that's the other really big thing is that progressives are more interesting and fun in conservative or centrist cities because they're real and they're not
Yeah,
just
well, and let's
conformist.
talk about I'm sorry, I think you actually make a great argument there, right? Like if you go to and Dallas is a Democrat city. Like it is a solid blue city. One of my cousins recently ran for Congress in Dallas and she ran as a Republican and it was just like she had no shot. She had no shot. My granddad was a congressman there who when it was Republican, but like it's not anymore. Anyway, so they if you contrast something like Dallas with something like Austin,
Mhm.
right? We've been to Austin recently, which is genuinely more progressive. Like it's like a
Way more
progressive
progressive.
city. It
Yes.
is nightmarish living
Yeah,
conditions.
it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel clean and
We
nice.
literally saw a bum fight.
Yeah,
Remember
it
we
was
had one
weird.
actually start following us and like yelling at us to like attack us
Yeah.
that one time.
Yeah, we felt
Austin
super
is
not
not
safe.
a safe place.
Yeah.
Could you
What's
imagine?
so funny though is that we also walked by that Boogaloo guy who like had a pretty
Did you know
sizable.
Austin had a parade, an antinatalist parade where everyone dressed in, like, black and, like, looked sad and, like
Oh, they just looked sad. It
yeah,
looks like a
apparently somebody said it was the most depressing parade they've ever seen because antinatalists are just, like, depressing people.
Mhm.
We're gonna have a pronatalist, like, parade like, a fairground thing when we host the pronatalist
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
much
yeah.
cheaper, so if you are in Austin,
For
I
the
live in
Natalist
a terrible
conference.
garbage fire of a city, but no, and I literally mean it, like, when I think, like, Austin, it is like Portland level bad. It is like an actual open garbage fire at this point. You would not want your kid walking
Some
down.
the neighborhoods outside of the main city. It's just the problems that we always go to, like that area around the convention center that has the most problems.
I don't think so. I mean, Dallas has quote unquote like downtown is a dangerous part of Dallas, and I've never actually felt in danger in downtown Dallas. I have been to Austin like 3 times recently, and I have felt in mortal danger every one of those times. I have
And
never
downtown Dallas has Wing
bring Dallas
Bucket.
to a bum fight.
Wing
What?
Bucket, home of the sour cream and onion
Yeah, I don't know if
fried
Wing Bucket's
chicken.
still there, but that was in central Dallas, so that really.
It had better
Um,
be. Oh, get your bucket.
right? You gotta get a bucket. When I learned something else for people who are watching this from Dallas, because I didn't know this when I was interviewing my dad, but apparently it was him. He's the reason why the underground tunnels that connect the center of the city do air conditioning stuff. He was on the or like started the
Oh,
committee
your
that put that
grandfather
together.
did that?
What?
Your grandfather started that?
No, I think my dad did. It was either my dad or my grandfather. I can't remember from the thing. I just didn't know.
Wing Bucket is still there, by the way, and also there is now a Deep Ellum location.
Oh yeah, I wanted to invest in them when I had their food. I was like, this is some
I know. You
good
think you
stuff.
met the owner and spoke with him, and you're like, "Can I invest?" And he's like, "I don't know, man. I just own this business." Flavors. Oh yeah, they
I
had
want to
PB and
talk about
J, spicy Korean
why
barbecue. Sorry.
why Austin is so bad, like why this ends up happening. And I think it's all downstream. And we talked about this in another episode, this rehabilitate rather than prosecute mindset, which is to say that when people are bad actors in a city environment, the progressive mindset is we can fix them and it's probably our fault that they're bad actors. Whereas the more conservative mindset is to say,
Just remove them from the equation.
remove them from the equation. Yeah, if they're being a bad actor, they're going to breed more bad actors, cause more people to make the same poor decisions that
Or
they've
just,
made,
yeah, cause more damage. So,
and worse, victimize innocent people, which is what we
mhm.
see in places like Austin. All of these signs that say things like keep Austin weird and stuff like that, you can be weird and still have a degree of ruthlessness to the way that you treat individuals.
Yeah, that's so true. You could be weird and ruthless. Weird doesn't
I
mean
am weird.
nice.
Hold on. When people say keep Austin weird, I'm in weird.
Oh
Okay.
no,
I,
now that but like
yeah.
since Tim Walz started the whole weird as like an accusation against conservatives, does Austin have to and does Portland have to drop the whole like do they have to drop weird?
I
Is
hope they do.
weird
I hope I actually want to like do a campaign around that. Like Portland is weird, just like JD Vance.
just like JD Vance. Yeah, make Portland weird again.
Here in Portland, we've been hearing for a while now that we are weird. And if he's weird, she's weird, and they're weird, and if this is weird and that is weird, then all we have to say is
Democrats and the Harris campaign now deploying a new adjective to blast the Republican ticket. Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
I mean, on the other side, they're just weird.
Weird.
It's not just a weird style that he brings.
Where are they?
I think they're talking about us.
No way.
Oh my god. Yeah, that would be interesting.
But when they say weird, they mean normative. Like they mean culturally normative to the urban monoculture. I mean, obviously that's what that's code for. But it turns them into these horrible places to have your kids. I mean, would you feel safe with your kids in Philadelphia right now?
I haven't been to Philadelphia for a long time. So I don't know.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I'm the one who still goes to Philadelphia. You don't. Yeah. When was the last time you went? You go to DC and New York more than Philadelphia now, right?
I do. Yes, sadly.
Even though we're
Just
like,
no one's in Philadelphia. Like we don't have a critical mass of movers and shakers in Philadelphia. We've tried to build it, but just no one seems to be there. Aside
Yeah.
from one person who I deeply respect. So there you go.
there's a couple interesting people in Philadelphia. We just don't.
What, aside from Tracy Woodgrains, who?
Oh, Tracy Woodgrain's in Philadelphia? No, I was thinking of the various like conservative influencers we know in the area. And keep
Oh, like the YouTubers who live in Phoenixville right by us, right?
yeah, so
Yeah.
for example, like somebody who lives in our neighborhood is the Lore Lodge guy. He's like I don't know where he is, but I know he lives in Phoenixville, so he's within 8 minutes of our house. But, no, I've also seen, like, I've been able to piece together where other YouTubers live, and I don't wanna, like, out it because it
Thing
says
is
that
not
they live in this
cool.
area,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, we live easily within a 10 to 15-minute drive of, like, 10 other really famous YouTubers. When we're not famous YouTubers here, I'm saying, like, these are, like, actually famous
Yeah,
YouTubers.
actually famous.
Like, our neighborhood is
Maybe we can
forever.
make this the new YouTuber hangout. You know, like in LA, there's all these mansions where YouTubers live, but like this is where the based family man YouTubers live, where everyone just has their own house and lives a good life instead of, you know, living
Yeah,
like
yeah, I mean,
cracked
all the
out.
YouTubers I'm thinking of are, like, true crime YouTubers or, like, cryptid YouTubers or, like, YouTubers who focus on geopolitics or YouTubers who focus on conservative politics. Those are,
Yeah.
like, the categories that this area seems to attract. But, and I will note this, that they are all, like, either politically centrist or conservative as YouTubers that I'm aware of, and they all are very private and do not hang out with, like, the wider YouTube community. So that's the thing, like, you could try to create like a critical mass of them here,
Yeah.
but they don't like they'd have no interest in talking with other YouTubers.
Come on, man. That sounds great. Let's just all. I grew up with this culture in my family. It's one of my favorite family traditions of all time. And this is something that my parents coined, or at least that's it they used. They called it parallel play, which is we would just all ignore each other and do our own things, but in proximity with each other. So we were enjoying each other's company. Sometimes we were listening to the same thing. Like we'd always listen to the same NPR shows together. We'd listen to This American Life. We'd listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me. We'd wait to listen to Car Talk. We'd listen to all these like folksy Bay Area, like San Francisco radio shows that came on. It was like a Celtic program. It was just great. And we would just all do it together with the same kind of backdrop of media and be really happy. My mom would fold laundry. I would go through catalogs while eating food, and my dad would do whatever it is that my dad did. And it was great. And I would just love to have a parallel play community here where everyone, like, maybe we'll walk by each other at stores and just be like, "Hey, I'm glad they're here, but not talk. We won't talk. And we won't make eye contact. We'll just be like,
That's your idea of community. I love all these people who are
yeah,
like, oh well, we moved near you guys, we'd want a feeling of community and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, your kids can play with our kids, but don't expect us to talk to you. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to risk having to
let's,
communicate with somebody. Even our like close friends, like people who I really respect, I don't like. I'm like I guess I moderately enjoy talking to them a few times a year, but I mostly like reading the content that they put out and watching the
yes,
videos they make.
yeah, yeah.
And that my social connection is a parallel parasocial connection. I don't need more than that.
Yeah, but then,
Um,
if the apocalypse comes, then we like, create a sort of defensive network and, trade guns and bullets and vodka, Legos, and
are
we're
we
all
are we
okay.
getting a bunch more guns this Black Friday?
Yeah. And maybe vodka and Legos for our currency. It'll be great.
That's a great gift for our
A
kids'
prepper,
godparents and stuff like that. You got to give them
vodka and Legos.
no vodka and guns.
Oh, vodka and guns. Oh, well, vodka, guns, and Legos. I feel like that's really, maybe that's what we can wear to like the Hereticon Apocalypse ball is just to have like little like
Oh yeah, we're gonna be speakers
cartridge
at
pouches.
Hereticon this next time, and we
Yeah,
got
but
to
they
talk
have
with.
like they have a ball that like either you have to wear black tie or you can wear apocalypse themed clothing. And I'm really thinking a lot about I don't want to go to the ball. I don't want to stay up late. And by late I mean go to bed past like 8 p.m. But I want an apocalypse costume.
Yeah,
Because I'm wearing one. Dressed like a cult member.
but I'd actually love to hear your theory. Why are
Some
cities like
kids.
Austin so bad to live like astronomically worse to live in and be in than cities like Dallas? Because here you're comparing urban to urban. Like, what is it? Or Houston, which is a. Have you been to Houston?
I've never been to Houston. Honestly, this is gonna be horrible, but I feel like culturally homogenous cities are just categorically a lot better to live in. I think Dallas is a more culturally homogenous city. I think cities like San Francisco and Austin are a lot more culturally mixed. And I don't just mean I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about culture. So, and were we even talking about like the Bay Area people versus the people who grew up in Austin clashing? when there's just not enough shared context, shared norms. Um,
I don't know.
I
As
think one of
somebody
the
who grew
reasons
up in
why,
Dallas, here's what you might be missing. There is a
yeah.
lot of cultural diversity of major populations in Dallas.
No, no, no. But no, no, no. You don't understand. That's not what I mean. It's not. You can come from a different background, but if you all grew up with the same norms and rules and
No, no, no.
understanding and
What I'm
context,
talking about. So, like the communities I'm thinking about that are huge in Dallas, for
yeah,
example,
yeah,
there is a very, very large Indian immigrant community in the Dallas area
yeah,
that is totally different value system from the rest, but it's like an aligned value system. When we're like, when you go to the Indian immigrants and you're like, we're gonna like get the homeless people out of town,
yeah.
we
They're
don't
like,
even like
yeah,
do that. Get rid of them. There's also a very large Hispanic immigrant population in Dallas,
yeah,
but again, they're like very conservative and based. There's
yeah. But that's
also
that's
a
what I
very
mean. It's
large few like Filipino communities and stuff like that in the Dallas area. But again, when they migrate to Dallas, I think what you're wrong about or what you're missing is that there's cultural diversity in both.
maybe I can make my point better if I describe this in the terms of like fan communities. A lot of people have talked about this phenomenon of fan or niche communities starting to suck when they get larger because first you have this community where a lot of different people came together but they all really enjoy this one thing and they all share the same inside jokes and they all came to it out of love for the thing and we're early fans of it. They know the content, the lore, and then the thing gets really big and starts going mainstream. And now a bunch of people are coming in, not necessarily because they love the property, but because it gives them cachet in other realms. Like, oh yeah, I'm a Star Wars fan. Like, or I like games, follow my channel. And they're not really into it for that. And they start to exploit the community in ways that they're not there for the spirit
But
of
this
it.
is totally different than your previous point. I mean, and I have noticed this about Dallas. So if you look at cost of living versus the amount of money you can earn in a city, typically if you divide those things, you get the terribleness of a city. The city with the worst that I have lived in, cost of living versus the amount that you earn in that city divisor is Miami. And it is by far the worst city I have ever been in from a lifestyle perspective.
Miami's yeah.
And the people it attracts. And it is because it is people who are sacrificing a decent ability to live for the ability to say that they live in Miami. Whereas if you're in Dallas, it's sort of on the opposite side of that spectrum.
Mhm.
Nobody's impressed when you say you live in Dallas.
Yeah,
And
they're
so if you
taking
are
the
moving
hit.
to Dallas, it is because you are moving there because when you divide the amount an average person makes there by the cost of living there, you're like, "Oh, this is a pretty good equation."
Mhm.
And so you go there, and I agree with that to an extent, and I think that that definitely cheeses Dallas's numbers. It's the bad brand that the Big D has, but I actually think that the bigger thing here is that when people with conservative sensibilities are migrating from around the world, i.e., if I'm a Hispanic immigrant and I'm moving to Dallas, or I'm an Indian immigrant and I'm moving to Dallas, or I'm a Filipino immigrant and I'm moving to Dallas, I am not moving there. And I think partially you're right here. Like, I'm not moving there because I want like cliche TMUS. Like, I don't want like the New York glitz and glam of an immigrant lifestyle. And I think that this is actually really true when immigrants often move to places like Miami and New York and San Francisco. They were partially fooled, maybe by movies, maybe by people who oversold what it was like to be an immigrant in these areas. When immigrants move to Dallas, it's usually because they had a family member in the Dallas area who's like, yeah, it's actually pretty nice here. Come on out.
Yeah.
And so what you are getting is more of a wide, open-eyed, practical immigration standpoint, and also an immigration standpoint that isn't utopianistic, but is pragmatic, right?
Mhm.
So, like, I'm not trying to move to the most perfect place that's ever existed. And for that reason, when I see politicians getting rid of homeless people, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I got kids here, man. Like, what do you, they, they, they keep hassling people. Like, why wouldn't I not handle that? And so I think that that is part of what it is because I think that and I've noticed this because we were around. I was actually looking at our school bus recently. We're again around. I grew up around a heavily Indian community because Dallas is heavily Indian. So I had a ton of Indian friends growing up. And recently I was looking at our school bus when it parked by our house in our neighborhood. And I realized that I think our kid was the only white kid I could see on the entire school bus. The entire rest of the population was South Asian or Indian, in other words. The reason I say South Asian is I can't tell the difference between Indians and Pakistanis. I know that's super offensive. So they could be Pakistanis.
Is
They're
it? Wasn't the line kind of arbitrarily drawn?
It was arbitrarily drawn, but they hate each other now. Okay.
Well,
So
we
I've
just
got to
can't
pretend
win.
that they are two distinct groups when to me they look the same. But anyway, the point being is our district, if you look at young people in our district, like people of our age range, is 70% South Asian. Like our like small neighborhood area. And so I was like, oh, it's weird that I ended up moving into Indian community again. But
They're great people.
yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not worried
Like
about
whenever
not
I
getting
I
drugs.
went
I'll tell you
door
what,
like
a racial
cooking.
stereotype, but
Yeah, but if I go door knocking into South Asian answers, like I think I'm gonna have a pretty good conversation. And all of my horrible experiences have been with white people. Every single one.
they're very entitled. I've seen was door
Every single
knocking.
one. And it's not just women, it's men too. And I think, why are we
No,
so-
I've noticed East Asians are really nice when you door knock too, right?
Yeah. That basically anyone who's not white has been amazing.
How has
Um,
the black family's been door knocking?
Awesome. Super nice. Like,
Um,
I
do
don't know
you
what to tell
notice
you.
when you're door knocking the heavy South Asian population, or is it just that they're really heavy in the younger breeding groups in our area?
They're 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 in all the nice houses. They're wealthy in our area. They're high achieving, and a lot of them are pretty based. So I don't
Mhm.
know.
I do not know how we have so many in our area. I assume
They're all
either
they're all working at SEI.
yeah,
You
they're like
know.
these two big corporate campuses we have here, like Pfizer is right next to our house,
Yeah,
SCI,
they have Pfizer. Yeah, because like I don't know. I'm assuming they're working at them because they're in the nice houses that cost a lot, and I like door knocking there because it's pretty. And
yeah, you go to the rich neighborhoods.
yeah, I haven't just gone to the rich neighborhoods. It's just that in the rich neighborhoods, people, especially if I'm door knocking on weekdays, they're more likely to be working from home, and so I can actually reach someone. Whereas in like apartment complexes and lower income areas, they have to work. I can't like they're not home. They're not going to answer their door.
Well,
And
I
they're
also
also
always love the immigration stories when door knocking because immigrants are like way nicer to Republicans than other people. Because a lot of them come from countries where it used to be terrible. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to go that direction in America. Like we've seen this
Mm.
with like the people who immigrated from China and stuff like that. They're really like, oh my God, like you guys are saving the country, sort of stuff. Which,
oh, okay, yeah, there've been some Chinese families. They weren't mean, just like very suspicious of me. But that's okay cuz I don't want people to knock on my door. Like I don't blame people for that. And
you
that's
coming with a baby?
I no, I was pregnant. Like
Oh,
when I've
pregnant.
met well, the memories I have with Asian families being very suspicious of me was when I was pregnant, but I probably just looked fat. So,
Oh, and that's a good reason to be suspicious of somebody.
yeah, it's a fat woman appearing at my doorstep, and this is not a good situation. But yeah, so the other thing I'm wondering though, and I don't know how much the stats are correcting for this, is the extent to which antinatalism is just getting and has been so bad in cities where yes, families are actually, actively moving out of cities, but also we're just not seeing the same rates of people having kids and babies in cities. And
Well, I
also
mean,
high
I think
fertility
you're gonna
groups
see
being priced out of cities.
a,
The cost of living in cities being so high.
a spiral collapse of the ability to have children in cities and have them safely in cities.
Mm.
Especially as, and I think we're going to see this more and more with progressives. I think we're already moving in this direction where people are going to see having kids as a strict moral negative and are going to want to begin to make life harder for parents. And I think that as
Mm.
the procreation of our species becomes increasingly partisan, I mean, this is why we put together the Collins Institute. As it becomes increasingly partisan, there is going to be less of a reason to, yeah, less let the future of humanity is going to become
Does
increasingly
it
decided
make
by conservatives.
Does make a difference though. And I wonder because in Seoul and in Tokyo and other, Japanese cities, there are awesome resources for kids, changing tables inside or like little seats you can put a baby in inside toilet stalls, amazing little shopping cart things for kids. Like they're
Oh,
very
and
kid friendly
all the grocery
cities.
stores we go at, they have special parking for people with infants.
Yeah. And yet, the birth rates aren't great there either. And they're very kid friendly. They're trying
Wait,
desperately.
who is?
I'm talking about cities in Tokyo and in Seoul as well. I'm not talking about here.
Oh, yeah, but that's a completely different cultural context. We've
Yeah,
talked
so we're
about
just
why fertility rates being low there. It's different from the reason why they're low here. If people are wondering, go watch our "Why Are Fertility Rates Low in Koreans" or "Why Can't Koreans Make These?" And it's like a picture of our baby. Look, Korean fertility rates are a totally different reason than US fertility rates.
and I'm
And
just
e
trying to make the argument that in a post-industrial society is making things pretty and easy for families really the thing that makes a difference? No, I don't think so. I think in the end, fundamentally, it's cultural and like a city making it more logistically difficult for parents, I don't think is going to be the death knell. It's the way people live that ultimately fundamentally changes birth rates and
maybe.
family formation.
Maybe. I will say as well, one thing I would say for people who have stereotypes of suburbs, and I've always found this really interesting, is this Octavian.
Uh,
The
I don't want to move. And he is totally crashed out on my lap. You should see Malcolm. She's like totally just done, milk drunk, very relaxed. Like having a cat sleep on your lap. You don't want to get up. Just like warm and heavy.
you can get started on dinner early.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up then.
You want to say, Octavian?
Octavian?
Well, I did the tour from school. So it does take too long.
Okay, and Octavian,
Let me
Oc-
get back to
Look
song.
at them all.
Octavian, do you want to live in a city or do you want to live where we live now by the trees and the
When I
grass?
go to a city.
You want to go to a
What do you wanna
city?
do? Tell me about it. Why do you want to go to a city? Why a city?
Because I really like city to get some or toys.
So cities have toys. Is that what's going on?
But doesn't Target have toys and that's near us?
Yes, I really want to go Target and get toys.
Do you
Okay.
remember New York?
Yeah.
Would you want to live in New York?
He doesn't remember New York. When he was taken, remember when we took Torsten and Octavian to New York when they were young, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. They're gonna play in all the parks and everything. Everything's so walkable. Central Park is huge. There are lots of playgrounds there. The playgrounds are so bad compared. Oh dear, to the playgrounds we have. I guess we're making dinner now.
You need to be careful about that, okay?
Oh, the playgrounds are really bad in New York City compared to what we have here. And I just didn't think. I thought Central Park is world
playgrounds here are
class.
luxe.
And then
Yeah.
Do you know that like the swimming pools here have like water slides
Wait, in our public
No,
place?
no,
in our area?
Yeah.
and I
Wow. Well, nothing beats the playgrounds in
If
Tulsa,
you wanna say
Oklahoma.
to our watchers, come on, you got to have something you want to say to them
Yeah,
about
at
living
least ask them to
favorite
like and
part about living
subscribe.
here.
uh
Is it the creek?
yeah,
Is it going on a boat?
yeah,
Okay, say like and subscribe.
like and subscribe.
All right.
Like, wait, what? No.
Like and subscribe. Oh, and I also want to make a video of me a turtle.
Okay, you want to be a turtle? Then become a turtle.
First, I need something on me, okay?
Okay, go get something on you, and you can go be a turtle.
I will send you a picture of what he's referring to.
Okay.
Since you
I
like
love
to
you,
just
Simone.
be a
Come on
turtle.
down.
Okay, on my way.
I
Okay,
love
cool.
you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Is that puzzle making you angry? Here, let me show you a little trick. You have to flip. Yeah. But Toasty was right the other way. Flip it. Flip it. Flip it. No. Flip it. 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 Toasty, what are you doing to me?